The sleep is low quality, if at all. So you got to get there fast, get there first, get offloaded, get food, get sleep, get back at it. If you're the last guy to the tender, you're in line for an hour or 2 hours. And on a 3-hour closure, that just doesn't cut it. It's a grind.
Welcome back for the second episode of JetCast by Marine Jet Power, the video podcast where we're mixing up the flow of marine industry news with firsthand input from industry experts. Today, we have a really exciting episode planned for you. We're going to be taking a behind-the-scenes look at the largest commercial salmon fishery in the world, Alaska's Bristol Bay. I'm your host, Kelsey Nemeth, Marketing Manager for Marine Jet Power, and I'm joined by two industry experts. First up, we have MJP's own UltraJet expert, Jim Campbell, and Captain Quinn Selitsch, owner and captain of the FV Smoky Point. So for those viewers that are watching that maybe aren't aware of how the fishery works, could you please explain how the season works?
Sure. So Bristol Bay is out in southwest Alaska, and there's 4 or 5 watersheds that all, are part of that Bristol Bay area. And we fish for sockeye salmon. And as you said, it's the biggest one in the world. And they're anadromous fish, so they start off in the freshwater. They lay their eggs in the freshwater. They're born in the freshwater streams, hang out in the lakes for a year or two, and then they head for saltwater, and that's where they put on their pounds. And of course, they return to the same streams that they were hatched in. And the Alaska Department of Fish and Game manages those rivers and streams and allows us to catch the excess fish, if you will, that come back. So there's 1,800 permits or something like that out there, drift permits. There's also set netters, and we put our nets in the water every summer and try to catch it all we can.
Yeah, that's great. So we know it's an extremely short season, so 6 weeks, is that correct?
Yeah, about 6 weeks. It's probably a little different for everybody. There's the influx of folks. There's the local people, whether they're local to the watershed or local to Alaska, and then there's folks coming from out of state and, out all across the world. Everybody's a little bit different, but the main part of the season is a good solid 5-6 weeks. Yeah.
It is really short. And you mentioned that it is a high concentration of Waterjet boats there. And an article that stated Bristol Bay, Alaska is the highest concentration of jet boats anywhere in the world. This question is kind of for both you, Jim and Quinn. Why do you think that is?
Well, I used to think that Cordova was the largest concentration of jet boats, but the way the bay has gone and the success that they've seen in the bay, I think now the bay is the highest concentration of jet boats. And it's, for me, Quinn can jump in here, but for me, it's obvious. The shallower that you're able to fish, the more concentrated you're able to catch the fish. And that allows you to fill up your fish holes faster, get back to the tender faster, deliver, and get right back in line to fish. Have I got that right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there for sure. The fish don't always hang out in the shallows. So, with a jet boat, luckily, you can fish in deep water too. But on the flats, in the shallower areas, those fish get concentrated in there, as they try to hang out in there as long as they can as the tide starts dropping, or vice versa. They, flood in there as it's coming in. The longer you can stay in there with the fish, the faster you can fill up. And that's the big move. You have all your options open when you can fish all the areas.
Quinn, how long have you been fishing the bay?
North of 20 years. I've been skippering with my own boat since 1996. And that was the last of a few good years. And that was the beginning of some bad years. There were some really low returns and run failures right after that. So I did it for little to no money for quite a while. So it's nice. This last decade or two has been really, well, not 2 decades, but, decade anyway, has been really good. So things have been well there. We've been on the upswing on the cycle. So that's really nice for everybody. The fleet has been repowering and building new boats the last 5 years, just like crazy. So it's nice to have some money back in the fishery.
And what's your background when you're not fishing? I mean, I've met a lot of commercial fishermen over the years that are biologists or got into it for one reason or another, and I'm curious as to how you got into it.
Well, my dad did it in Cordova, is where he started fishing. He was in a wooden skiff, maybe like Miller skiff, I think they called it, or Tiedemann skiff, maybe is what they're called. Wooden flat bottom with an outboard, and back in the 70s. And, I went out with him a few times when he had a bow picker that, I think was a Jet, but I'm not really positive. That was a mighty long time ago. And then he moved to Bristol Bay. And so I've been, I started there when I was 9, just running the hydraulics for my dad, and getting yelled at and, having to do all the dirty jobs that the low man on the totem pole has to do. But I learned a lot. And then I moved to Prince William Sound. Well, I grew up in Cordova. So then I moved back there, seining with some family friends, and seined in Chignik. And, I've been all the way from in the north, herring gill netting in Security Cove down to hand trolling for albacore in the Roaring Forties, 10 days south of Tahiti. So I've put in my time on the sea, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And, in the years where we had a few run failures, I was forced to take other work. So I went to the oil fields in northern Alaska and I've worked there for 20 some years now too.
Yeah. One of the things that I found about commercial fishermen is they are jack of all trades. If you're going to be on a boat and you've got mechanical equipment on that boat that needs service or whatever, you need to take care of yourself. And a lot of our customers seem to be pretty self-sufficient.
Yeah, well, no one man can do it all. So you really have to hire good help as well. So I've got a couple of guys that have been with me for 8 years, and they can do more than I can for sure. We can weld, we do our own hydraulic work, repair these new boats. The design of the hydraulics are quite complicated these days. So we do what we can with that. We've got RSW systems, or refrigerated seawater systems, on the boat. So one of my guys is an HVAC tech, so he knows a lot about that, and that's awesome. So just really have to pull from all your resources and get all the help you can, because these boats are not our father's boats. I know some guys that have 5 crews, so there's 6 guys on the boat. Those guys can really get the fish out of the net, that's the slowest part of the whole process. It's easy to get them in if they're there, right? And then each one's got to come out by hand. You got to pick the fish out of the net. And that's certainly the slowest, most time-consuming piece of the process.
On that same line, we heard reports that this year was an absolute record-breaking, smashed any previous historical record for how many fish were caught. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what contributes to that?
Yeah, it was an epic season for sure. We had north of 60 million fish catch. So by far the largest. And then the escapement was, right around 19 million or something like that. So 78, 79 million fish total run. That's huge. There was fish everywhere this year. It was a sight to see for sure. Any one reason on something on that kind of abundance is pretty hard to pin down, but it certainly starts with a healthy watershed. The streams and the lakes and the rivers and a healthy ocean, and then ends with proper management. They have ADF&G does escapement-based management where they put in towers or sonars or whatever, and they literally count the fish as they return. And that's a lot of counting for 20 million fish coming back up a river, past the tower or the sonar. They have their preseason forecast, and they plot that on a curve, over time. And we don't get to go fishing until they start getting, fish past the tower and they're on or ahead of their escapement curve. So we don't have a quota. We just catch as much as we can in the allotted time they give us. They give us an opener or 2 every day if they're getting their escapement. And of course, the past several years, they really have been getting a lot and getting more than they anticipated. So it's healthy there right now. And of course, not all the fisheries across the planet are, and even some in Alaska are struggling a bit. But Bristol Bay has just been a firecracker for the past decade or so.
You guys are basically stewards of that resource, and that's another thing that I've just really appreciated about commercial fishermen is I don't see guys that just want to go out there, catch every fish that they possibly can, the hell with the future. You guys are part of a management system, and you're taking care of that resource that you have so that you can pass that down to future generations.
Yeah, it just has to be that way. I mean, we've seen like the some other fisheries. I won't name any because I don't know them all that well. But there's they've overfished some fisheries. It's just happened. We just can't do that here. I mean, I guess we could, but nobody wants to. So Alaska does a really good job. They're conservative, and they have to be, and that's a struggle between the fishermen and the managers. But they have the final call. It's just the way it is, and in the end, it's good. That's the way it's supposed to be.
I have seen a lot of opinions on why the runs are so much larger, these days. And one of the thoughts was that with the oceans warming just a tad, and maybe the glaciers melting a little bit more, there's more plankton production in the water, which of course feeds the salmon as they're out in the oceans living their lives before they come back to the rivers. It may even be that they're a slightly smaller per fish than they were in the past, but I'm sure all of these things kind of come and go, in different ways.
Yeah, they do. And, like with the glaciers melting, I mean, that just adds to the amount of available nesting areas over time. I mean, I'm not an expert on that, obviously, but as they have more food, it's more opportunity, right? They are getting smaller, though. When I first started fishing, I remember I would often buy net with a mesh size of about 5 1/8 inches. Well, that's way too big now. So the fish have gotten smaller for sure. And what causes that?
And sometimes they attribute that to the competition then for food that you have out in the ocean. If you have a lot more fish, the competition for what they have to eat, and then that can also contribute to the size of the fish.
I believe that's true.
So tell us about openers and opening day. So tell us what that is like a little bit, and how, everybody's lined up and with the nets and tight spaces and having water jets. How does that kind of help you in that scenario?
Yeah. So the ADF&G, depending on which river system you're in, you'll get one opener a day or maybe two. And they try to work around the tides. So there's boundary lines, and the fishermen will just congregate at the boundary line in any given river system, depending on if it's the flood or the ebb. And so ADF&G doesn't really like that. So they try to manage the time openings and closings to avoid us catching everything coming into the district, because the fleet's really good at stopping a certain amount of fish coming into the district. They can't stop them all, of course, just because, especially on a big year like this, but they have to have a closure so the fish will get into the district on the flood or the ebb, depending on, again, which river system it is. That way, as the next flood happens or what have you, that'll push fish up past the district and into the inner river where they've made it home, and they're going to go spawn, and they just manage it that way. And we try to catch as much as we can when they allow us to go. So like in the Nushagak River, they'll give us maybe 2 8-hour openers a day. So that, or an 8 and a 10. So that doesn't leave a whole lot of downtime to deliver your fish, to get some food, get some sleep, and get back to where you want to start fishing again for the next period. And, that's where this horsepower comes into play, and jet units come into play, because you can skip across the bars. You don't have to go down around the bar and into the channel and so on and so forth. And that just takes time. And you're really trying to beat everybody to the tender line, because all the catchers, all the little boats with the gill nets on them, all run to the tenders, which are oftentimes big crabbers that you've seen on the Disney Channel and whatnot. And we deliver our fish to them. Then we get a receipt, and they take it off to the processor and process it. But if you're the last guy to the tender, you're in line for an hour or 2 hours. And on a 3-hour closure, that just doesn't cut it. The sleep is low quality, if at all. So you got to get there fast, get there first, get offloaded, get food, get sleep, get back at it. And after doing that for 5 or 6 weeks, I mean, it's a grind. It takes a toll. You're a zombie. You know, your decisions really start to deteriorate on where to go, where to fish, you know, how long to keep your net in the water. It's a grind.
Was that something you took into consideration when you were designing and building your new vessel, the Smoky Point?
Yeah, for sure. I have 1,200 horsepower on the Smoky Point now, which is a lot, but it's not the most. You know, I think there's guys out there with like 1,600 horsepower these days, which is mind-boggling to have that much. But when you have an opening set for, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 pounds, and you can get on step and go to the next location where your buddies are nailing them, or, you know, your secret spot or whatever, you know, you just have to have it, you know. And if you don't, you're just going to be average or below average. And there's folks that are trying to have this be their one job and live off of what they make in these 5 or 6 weeks for the rest of the year. I mean, there's, you know, not that many folks doing that, but there's some for sure. So when I wanted the Smoky Point, when I wanted this boat, I wanted to be able to pack a lot. I wanted to be able to get a lot on step and move fast with my refrigerated fish. And this year I got 9,300 pounds up once and 9,700 pounds up another time. So that's a lot of freaking weight that you're moving, and doing 25, 28 knots back to the tender. So they're workhorses, these boats these days, that they're a sight to see. The guys that are operating them are pros, and they're really good. And it's awesome to see a guy setting a net at, you know, 18 knots or 22 knots or something like that up in the shallows. And you have to have a jet boat to do that. It's just the way it is.
And you chose Jeff Johnson at Peregrine to build your boat. How was that experience?
Well, it was good. You know, the short version is it's good. And it happened over COVID, so that was bad. Wasn't always allowed into their shop, which I would like to have been there for the whole time. But, you know, I've never built a boat before. So, you know, have I really helped? How much would I have really helped? That I made some decisions on design that really weren't the best. And, you know, that's just the way it is. I'd like to do it over again. You know, like to build another one. They say that, you know, you got to build it 3 times to really have what you'd hoped for the first time. But, you know, that's not.
Well, we do have multiple customers that have built boats, so we'd be happy to help you with that down the road.
Yeah. It's a beautiful boat, though. It sure is. I think it's, you know, I'm obviously biased, but, you know, I think it's the most beautiful of this bow stern picker style that's out there.
Yes, you've got the high cabin that gives you better visibility all around the boat while you're fishing.
Yeah, everything except for right under my feet, which is oftentimes where the crew is at. They're working right under the cabins, but I've got cameras for that. But with that big cabin up high, it's a sail, you know, and with no keel, man, that boat will slide through the water with the wind for sure. That's one of the drawbacks, but far outweighed by the amount that it'll pack. I had 24,000 pounds refrigerated under the hatches this year. So, you know, that helps. There's a lot of boats that won't do that. Many boats only do half of that. So that's time traveling to the tender when I'm still fishing. So
you said you've been doing this for a long time, since the 90s, and, you know, you saw your father do it before you. So how have you seen vessel designs and builds with propulsion packages change over the years?
Yeah, well, we've talked a little bit about that. Like my dad on the Copper River Flats having a, you know, wooden boat with an outboard. We've come a long way, baby, from that, right? You know, to these twin jet bow pickers or stern pickers. Not everybody's got a bow picker, or like I do, have got both in one boat. But there for a long time, there was just props in the bay. I mean, I don't know when the first jet boat got to Bristol Bay, but I'm sure it was, you know, 30 years ago or so. Most of the new boats are jet boats, you know, because they see, you know, the skippers have seen these guys with their jet boats just nailing them. You know, they come to the tender and you've got your 5 or 6 or 8,000 pounds, and somebody's coming in with 20,000 pounds or 30,000 pounds or something like that. And there's less of that now because there's more guys in the shallows fishing. I mean, obviously this year there's plenty of guys coming in with 30,000 pounds, but with more horsepower and more jet boats, the boats, we're restricted in Bristol Bay to the boats are only 32 feet long. That's the max by law. So, my first boat was a fiberglass stern picker that was just under 11 feet wide. Well, now the Smoky Point is 17 feet wide. And there's a lot of boats that are 15 feet, 16 feet, and, and beyond, 18 or 19 feet wide. And I've seen designs for boats that were going to be 21 feet wide with triple jets. And, it's going to be a square pretty soon. It's changed a lot over the last, 50 years for sure.
Having such a short season, how does that impact your vessel operations and preparedness with understanding like the cost of downtime and parts availabilities? Did that lead to any decision for you to choose Waterjets for your boat?
Well, in a perfect world, your boat and all its components are going to work beautifully and never fail. But that's not the real world. There is downtime, and downtime just equals heartbreak and lost income. You really have to be prepared. You go up, the fleet arrives in May and gets their boat ready and does their usual stuff, getting the nets ready, changing the oil. I'm putting in rebuilt impellers because in the shallow water, you tear stuff up and sucking up rocks and pumping sand and stuff like that. So I got to have the impeller rebuilt almost every year. Wasn't that bad this year. The fish were not in the shallows in the district that I was in the numbers that they have been in the past, just their pattern. So it's much less wear and tear this year than I've had in the past. You have to go through all your hydraulic lines and make sure there's no chafing, and you got to make sure your thrust bearing has been greased and it's not going to leak, and so on and so forth. So it's really just an endless process, and sometimes you don't get it all done before the gun goes off and you got to go fishing. So you kind of manage it as you go along. But for me, obviously a Waterjet is more complex than a prop, that's sitting on a shaft. But the complexities are not. I'm no rocket scientist, and if I can do it, certainly you can do it. And just it's not hard. The benefits far outweigh any down. I don't even know what the downside is. That's they're just way better to have, in my personal opinion. So
it almost seems to me, based on all my experience, that there's two different types of fishermen. There are the fishermen that want to put their boat away, ready to go for next season. So they'll actually get some spare parts after the season so that they can get their boat ready, put that thing away, and then know that it's there and they come back around next summer. And then I have other guys that seem to go up at all varying different times. Some, I would argue, too late, and they're in a panic trying to get their boat ready. And like you said, maybe they're not ready when the gun goes off.
I don't know why you're looking at me when you say that last part. No,
I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't put you in that category at all.
But
we have had some guys, and I'm thinking, what were you waiting for? Because like you said, you have too much on the line. You've got a lot to lose if you're not ready to roll.
Yeah. And, I think that just fishermen in general are adverse to spending money, but you don't, if you don't spend money on maintenance, it's just going to cost you. Like if you, in the peak of the season, early July, mid-July, if you have a breakdown and your part is in Seattle or it doesn't really matter if it's not on the boat and you can't fix it, you're losing money, and the part costs X amount of dollars, and that's X amount of fish, and it's not very many fish. Fish they're worth a lot of money right now, and downtime, that's a heartbreaker. So you have to be prepared. You got to carry your critical spares. You just have to, straight up.
Absolutely. Well, I have just one last question for you, and this is how we like to end every podcast episode. What is your best, most memorable experience on the water to date?
Well, the oceans are beautiful, of course. The freedom and the adventure is like nowhere else on the planet. But they can also exact a heavy toll. And all my near-death experiences have been on the water. So that's, like I said, I've been fishing since I was around 9, and from Alaska to the South Pacific, and there has been many, hand lining albacore. I've caught what are those, marlin, striped marlin on a hand line. Didn't land that one, but it was an epic experience for sure. The sunsets, the good weather and the bad can be fun. The fish really in Alaska, those salmon, they pour in when the weather's bad. The wind pushes the fish for sure. So over almost 45 years now of fishing, there's a lot of memories. To pull just one, that seems like an unfair question, honestly, but it's been a great life working on the sea.
Well, I can answer this one if I can weigh in on it. So when we decided to get into the commercial market for fishing, I am a bit of an outdoorsman, and my boss said, would you like to go up to Alaska and learn about commercial fishing? So I flew up to Cordova. We had a few customers in Cordova, and I went out on an opener with one of our customers. Never met him before. He was nice enough to take us out. We fished a 24-hour opener. I learned how to pick fish out of the net. We were icing them up at that time, and so we were bleeding them and icing them. And I think in the 24-hour opener, we caught about 4,000 pounds of fish. I went from Cordova and flew up to King Salmon. I went out on the Eternity. And, you got to remember, I'm just an Ohio guy. I'd never seen anything like this. So I went out on the Eternity. I did an opener on the Eternity, and I think we caught 10,000 pounds in the first 12 hours. And like you said, it was go, go, go. It was hectic. I remember catching a nap down in the little doghouse that they have. They have a very similar raised platform like you do on your boat. And I woke up and I thought it was daytime because it was very bright. And when I crawled out of there, I realized we were at the tender, the fish flopping on the deck, all the fish holds were full. So that was my introduction to Bristol Bay, and something that will always have a huge impact on me. And I think that was in 97 that I went. So quite a while ago. Things have changed. I think there were some good times then before it turned a little bit south for a while.
Yeah. So when you mentioned Cordova, that's where I first started seeing the UltraJets on some of my friends' bow pickers down there. Then I started seeing them in Bristol Bay, and I wanted to try something different. So that's why I went with the UltraJets. And, there was 4 or 5 other guys building similar boats as mine, and they all chose that. So it was kind of I think mine started being built in 2019. So I figured, there's a movement there. These guys are all really good fishermen, North Line guys of the Igigik district. And if they're using them, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon and ride it. And I do like them. There's some easier aspects of the maintenance that I really do enjoy, honestly. It's from the brand I had before.
Good. Well, thank you both so much for being guests on the show today. Thank you to everyone watching for tuning in for the second episode of JetCast. If you would like to be a guest on our next show, or if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below in the comments or email us at marketing@marinejetpower.com.
And if anybody wants to go over to my YouTube channel, Saltwater Salmon, all one word, please do. Check it out. You'll see the Smoky Point in action in Bristol Bay.